Hello, my name is Will Baber, and I'm going to talk a little bit about business models and try to explain what that means. So when we talk about any organization, we have a basic model that is always there. So supplies go into the organization and something transforms them, the people, the machines transform them, and they turn into products and services that come out the other side of the organization. So that's true for all businesses and organizations, but when we talk about a business, it's usually more a complex, dynamic thing. So we like to simplify and talk about particular parts of the business, and that's what we mean by a business model. So it's a simplified version of how the business works, and it is not a business plan, which is usually financial planning and numbers and projections, and it's not a financial model or that sort of thing. So sometimes those terms get confused. But when we talk about business model, we're looking at a simplified version of some part of the business, and that can be very helpful. What is that helpful for? The purpose of business models is to help us understand how the business works, and that means how it is successful or how it is unsuccessful. It's also useful for communicating about the business. So understanding the business model, the simplified version of the business, helps managers to talk among each other and make good decisions. It also helps them to communicate with the workers and the customers and the environment around them. Innovation is another important use for business models, because if we understand the parts of the business model, we can see better how to improve them. Strategy is another useful point here. So not only do we make small adjustments to business models, we can make big, grand, strategic adjustments to the whole business. And all of this comes together to mean that we can design the business instead of just letting things happen accidentally or reacting to the environment. What is that helpful for? So when we talk about the business model, usually we're talking about many kinds of models inside the business model. So a business is made up of a lot of different systems. So those systems include gaining customers and satisfying them, and bringing in money and spending it, that's the revenue model. Managing information that comes in and new knowledge that is created inside the company. Bringing in workers and labor, training them and developing them. All of these are models inside of the idea of business model. So when we talk about making those models, there's a process that we can go through. And Wirtz in his books and articles has a 6-part process for doing that. So the first part is describing the business. Second is visualizing it, and this is why we make maps and drawings. The third is reducing the complexity. Like I said, a business model is a simplified thing. And then we try to gain overall understanding. After that, we can identify advantages, problems, things we want to change, and realize those changes. So that last one is more than understanding, it is improving the business. So in the end, we want to get the benefits of business models, which are communication, strategy, innovation, bring them all together into a design bundle so that we can improve a business and understand the environment that it exists in. So in the visualization step that I mentioned, we'll make maps and wire diagrams showing how one part of the business model connects to another part, or how one process or supply goes in and transforms and comes out again. So wire diagrams can show what's happening in the business, but they can also connect to what's happening outside of the business, either on the supply side or the output side, upstream or downstream. So these could include competitors, regulators, suppliers, secondary customers, and users, and so on. So in a simplified wire diagram, we might show on the left side supplies coming in and main things happening in the middle, and then products going out. So with the example of a video company, a video games company, for example, we would have ideas coming in from pop culture and from other games and competitors, and we would have software development kits coming from big platforms like Xbox or PS, PlayStation. And we would have the work of design going on in the company. Then the product is the game that comes out. It has to be distributed through a platform, which again would be Xbox or PlayStation. And it goes to the customers and the end users, which are sometimes the same thing or sometimes different groups. So all of that can be put in simplified terms in a picture of wiring diagram or arrows and ribbons, whatever you like to do. So there are no particular rules about how to draw a business model or write it, and there are different tools. But we can also, let's stop for a moment and think about the level of the model that we want to make. So I have been talking about business models inside of a business. All right, so we can make business models at different levels. They can be the whole business, or they can be parts inside the business. They can also be the business related to other businesses, or the whole industry. We can also go down deeper and deeper into more granular layers and do business processes of an office or a person. So we can go right down to specific processes, or we can go all the way up to a macro picture of a whole industry. Another way to do a business model, in addition to wiring diagrams, is a SIPOC model, SIPOC. And SIPOC stands for supplies, inputs, processes, outputs, and customers. So again, that's similar to what I've been saying. This is usually done in a written format with a box and short list of each of those things. So S suppliers, you would have key suppliers that provide raw materials or semi-finished materials for the business. The inputs are some of the other things that they have to buy and use, like equipment, for example. Processes are the things that they actually do inside the business. And this one you might expand to show much more detail or to show particular processes. And then the outputs are the concrete products or the services, and the customers at the end. So generally, we take sort of a left to right when we're drawing or writing a business model. And on the left will be the inputs and supplies, on the right will be the outputs and customers. So one of the business model tools that relies on mostly writing, a good combination of writing and graphics, is the business model canvas that was developed by Pinura and Osterwalder. And this is a very convenient tool that shows 9 boxes on a single page. And again, roughly going from left to right, things that go into creating a value proposition, which is put in the middle, and the distribution and customers on the other side. So this business model canvas is especially nice because it gives us richer explanations about what's happening in the business. We can write more, we can be more flexible about whether we describe large-scale or detailed processes. And in the center, it shows what the value propositions are. That's not the product. The value proposition is what makes the customer give their money to get that. So the value proposition is always going to include satisfaction, but we can write more specific sorts of value propositions. So the value proposition of a bicycle is that it gets you transportation from here to there. Also, it can give you exercise. Also, it can give you a good feeling of being outside. So those three value propositions might not matter to all the customers, but the customers will want one or more of those value propositions. Now, if the customer wants a different transportation value proposition, like quickly getting a long distance and flexibly going from one specific location to another one that's not available to mass transportation, they'll pick a car, probably, because that has the value proposition of flexibility, speed, longer range, and keeps you out of the rain, which the bicycle doesn't. So different value propositions appear for different products and different services. The business model canvas also helps us understand better relationships among the suppliers on the left side and the key activities that are happening inside the business with the business itself. And again, it can show better relationships more clearly on the right-hand side, where it talks about channels of distribution and relationships with the customer and the end user groups. To give an example of how the business model canvas works, we might think about Google. So Google is very well known. It's one of its value propositions is free search. So anybody can sit down at a browser and type in a word or a phrase and find something out about it. And this value proposition is used by web users and web surfers for all sorts of purposes. They don't pay anything. So it looks like this is this part of the business model is free. Another value proposition that they offer, that Google offers, is targeted advertising. So all of the data from the users, from the surfers, comes back to Google and helps Google to identify interested groups and individuals and characterize them, and they can sell that to advertisers. The advertisers get that value proposition and pay money for it, and they are also in the customer category. Another value proposition is the ability to monetize content. So content creators are also customers and users for Google. So their value proposition is that they can take their video, or they can show their product and get money for it. If we think about this on the business model canvas, we would put those three value propositions in the middle, and we can connect each one to a customer on the right. However, that doesn't show what Google really is. Google is a platform, and we need to be able to make business models of platforms. So in the business model canvas, we need to move the web surfer who is getting a value proposition for free also to the side of the supplier. So the customer in a platform like this is also a key provider of material, of raw supplies. They're producing the data by their activity. And then the key activity process inside the company is to understand that data and present it to advertisers. So in a platform like this, we have a loop that puts those people on both sides, puts some of the users on the side of suppliers and customers. So platforms are a kind of category of business model that we should talk about. So there can be two-sided or multi-sided platforms. Platforms are usually matching up customers and providers, but they can also match additional parties that provide more services or similar kinds of services, and which help to improve the customer experience or to do more for the suppliers or the customers. And we call those multi-sided platforms. So an example of a platform that has existed from ancient times, long before there was any kind of digital platform, would be a marketplace. So everyone is familiar with a marketplace. There is some kind of an operator of the market that organizes stalls and booths, and it could be the city that does that or a private operator. People come to sell different kinds of things and add value to the other things being sold, and the customers come to buy, and a lot of other activities are happening in that marketplace. There's sharing of information, there are third parties that are monitoring it, and so on. So this is very much like a digital business platform. So we can have platforms that are physical or digital or combined, hybrid. So that means that we've talked about wire diagrams, we've talked about SciPoc graphics, and we've talked about the business model canvas, which is a combination of graphic and written explanations. We can also have business models that are dynamic causal loops, where we can see the relationship of how one activity reinforces another activity. So the Uber, everyone will be familiar with, provides ride sharing and other matching kind of services. The original ride sharing business model was drawn on a napkin, according to legend, and it shows two main loops. One is the demand loop, where more demand means more drivers, and more drivers mean more geography, covering more geography, which means faster pickups, which means more demand, which means faster drivers, and goes around in a loop. So this is a reinforcing loop with 4 steps, and it has one more side loop that also reinforces. The more geographic coverage that there is, the less driver downtime there will be, and the lower the prices will be, which means that there will be more demand, which means there will be more drivers, and so on. So we can also draw a business model as reinforcing or loops, or the opposite, loops that weaken each other, and understand a business model as a causal loop system, a dynamic system of strengthening and weakening. Now, if you apply that to Google, you come up with a more complex model, which involves the quality of the algorithm and the quality of the engineers and the ability to attract those engineers. And their success boosts the attraction of advertisers, and their success boosts the number of users, and so on and so forth. So there are some strengthening and some weakening loops in that model, but we can represent Google's platform in business almost entirely as these kind of dynamic causal loops. And that introduces the basic kinds of business models that we talk about, and the reasons for trying to understand an organization, especially a business, by using business models. To summarize, we do this for the sake of understanding, and we want to understand for the sake of communicating and improving and innovating. So that's all.